My family refused to celebrate my birthday, so life gave me a gift they'll never forget. I still remember the morning of my 73rd birthday. The house was quiet, too quiet. I woke up with that small flutter of hope in my chest, the kind that refuses to die no matter how many times it's been disappointed. I thought maybe this year would be different. Maybe someone would remember. Maybe my son, David, would call early like he used to when he was young, singing off-key through the phone. Maybe my daughter-in-law, Rebecca, would stop by with flowers, or my grandchildren would rush through the door with handmade cards covered in crayon hearts. But as the sunlight crept through my kitchen window and the clock ticked past 9, then 10, then noon, I realized the truth. They had forgotten me. Again. Welcome, my dear. This is Grandma Alice Stories, where every tale carries a lesson and every wound carries wisdom. Sit close, grab your tea, and listen carefully because life has its own way of settling scores. What I'm about to share with you isn't just my story. It's a reminder that silence can speak louder than words. And sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the very pain we thought would break us. I set the kettle on the stove that morning, same as I did every day. The steam rose slowly, curling into the air like ghosts of memories I tried not to hold on to. I'd baked myself a small lemon cake the night before, my favorite since I was a girl. It sat on the counter, plain and humble, with no frosting, no candles. I told myself it didn't matter. Birthdays were just days after all. Just another rotation around the sun. But deep down, in that tender place we all try to protect, it mattered. It mattered so much. I thought about calling David. My fingers hovered over the phone more than once. But pride, or maybe dignity, held me back. A mother shouldn't have to remind her child that she exists. A mother shouldn't have to beg to be remembered. So I didn't call. I sat at my small kitchen table, the one I'd polished 1,000 times over the years, and I ate a slice of that lemon cake alone. Tasted like dust. The hours passed. I watered my garden, folded laundry, watched the neighbors come and go. Mrs. Henderson next door waved at me from her porch, and I waved back, smiling like everything was fine. That's what we do, isn't it? We smile through the cracks, hold ourselves together with invisible thread, and pretend the loneliness doesn't cut as deep as it does. By evening, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart leapt. Foolish, hopeful thing that it is. I stood up quickly, smoothing my apron, patting my hair. Maybe they had come after all. Maybe they'd been planning a surprise. But when David walked through the door, he barely looked at me. "Hey, Mom," he said, distracted, scrolling through his phone. Rebecca followed behind him, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor like little daggers. She didn't even glance my way. The kids, my sweet grandchildren, Emma and Jacob, rushed past me toward the living room, already absorbed in their tablets. "Hi, sweetheart," I said softly, trying to catch David's eye. "I didn't know you were stopping by." "Yeah, we were in the neighborhood," he muttered, still not looking up. "Rebecca wanted to grab that casserole dish she lent you last month." My chest tightened. They weren't here for me. They were here for a dish. Rebecca swept into the kitchen, opening cabinets like she owned the place. "Found it," she announced, pulling out the glass dish I'd washed and set aside weeks ago. She turned to David. "We should go. We have dinner reservations at 7. Dinner reservations. My son had dinner reservations on my birthday, and he didn't even know. I stood there, frozen, my hands folded in front of me like a child waiting for permission to speak. I wanted to say something. "It's my birthday. Did you forget? Do I matter so little now?" But the words caught in my throat, because maybe I already knew the answer. Maybe I'd known for a long time. "Mom, you okay?" David finally looked at me, but only for a second, a flicker of concern that vanished as quickly as it came. "I'm fine, honey," I lied. "Just tired." "You should rest more," he said absently, already heading toward the door. "We'll see you next week, maybe." And just like that, they were gone. The door clicked shut, The car engine hummed to life, and the house fell back into its suffocating silence. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, staring at the lemon cake on the counter, at the single slice missing. I felt something crack inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like ice splintering under too much weight. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage or call anyone or throw things. I simply sat in my rocking chair by the window, looking out at the darkening sky, and I made a decision. I decided that I would not beg for love anymore. I would not chase after people who had already decided I wasn't worth remembering. I had spent my whole life giving, my time, my energy, my heart, and I had nothing left to give to people who couldn't even pause long enough to say, "Happy birthday, Mom." But here's the thing about silence, my dear. It has a way of revealing truths we've been too afraid to see. And as I sat there in the dim light of my small living room, I started to notice things. Little things. The way David had stopped asking how I was. The way Rebecca looked at me like I was a burden, an inconvenience. The way my grandchildren barely knew my name anymore. I had become invisible in my own family. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I did something about it. The next morning, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my late husband's lawyer, a man I hadn't heard from in over 5 years, not since Harold passed. My hands trembled as I opened it, and what I read inside changed everything. Harold had left me something I never knew about, a trust fund, modest but significant, tucked away in an account I'd never been told existed. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days. Enough to leave behind, if I chose to. I sat down slowly, the letter still in my hands, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Not out of joy, but out of clarity. Because suddenly I understood. Life had just handed me a choice. A gift wrapped in irony and consequence. And as I stared at that letter, one thought echoed in my mind. Quiet but undeniable. They forgot my birthday, but they'll never forget what comes next. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not bitterness, but something far more powerful. I felt awake, and I knew, deep in my bones, that everything was about to change. The letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I touched it again. I'd read it once, twice, a dozen times, each word sinking deeper into my chest like stones in water. Harold had left me money, not a fortune by the world's standards, but enough to matter, enough to change things. And tucked at the bottom of that letter was something else. A note, written in his shaky handwriting during his final days. Alice, my love, I'm sorry I can't be there to grow old with you, but I want you to know this: you were always the strongest one. Use this however you see fit. Give it to those who deserve it. And don't let anyone make you feel small ever again. You're worth more than all of us combined. I traced my fingers over his words, feeling the weight of them settle into my bones. Harold had known. Even in his last moments, battling the illness that would take him, he had known that I'd need this someday. Not the money itself, but the choice it would give me. The power to decide my own worth when everyone else had stopped seeing it. That Sunday, David called. Not to check on me, not to apologize for missing my birthday, he still hadn't realized. But because he needed something. "Hey, Mom." His voice came through the phone, casual, distracted. I could hear Rebecca in the background saying something about paint colors. "Listen, we're thinking about renovating the kitchen. Opening it up, making it more modern. Rebecca found this contractor, but he's pretty expensive. We were wondering if you could help us out a little. Maybe 5,000 or 6,000. We'd pay you back, of course." My grip tightened on the phone. $5,000 or $6,000. Spoken so easily, like it was pocket change. Like I was an ATM he could withdraw from whenever convenient. "David," I said slowly, carefully, "when's my birthday?" There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause that told me everything I needed to know. Mom, what? Where's this coming from?" Just answer the question, sweetheart. When is my birthday? I could hear him fumbling, probably looking at Rebecca for help. It's in the spring, right? April? May? It was last week, David. Last Tuesday. You came to my house that very evening to pick up a casserole dish. The silence on the other end was deafening. Mom, listen, things have been crazy. Work has been insane. The kids have activities every day, and Rebecca's been planning this renovation for months. I'm sorry. Okay? I forgot. I forgot. 2 words that somehow managed to shrink my entire existence down to something forgettable. Something that slipped through the cracks of his busy, important life. I see, I said quietly. And now you need money. Well, yeah, but that's different. This is family helping family, right? You've always been there for us. You're right, David. I have always been there. Every scraped knee, every failed test, every broken heart. I was there when you married Rebecca, there when your children were born. I babysat when you needed me, cooked when you were too tired, listened when the world felt too heavy. I gave you everything I had. Mom, what's going on with you? Why are you being like this? Like what? Honest. My voice was steady, calm even, but underneath it was steel. I'm being honest, David. Something I should have been a long time ago. So, does that mean you're not going to help us with the renovation? I closed my eyes, feeling a tear slip down my cheek. Not from sadness, not anymore, but from the final breaking of something I'd been holding on to for too long. The hope that my son would wake up one day and see me. Really see me. No, David. I won't be helping with your renovation. But I do hope you and Rebecca enjoy your new kitchen. I'm sure it will be beautiful. I hung up before he could respond. The next morning, I made an appointment with my lawyer, Mr. Thompson. He was an elderly man himself, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that reminded me of Harold. His office smelled of old books and coffee, and when I sat down across from him, he looked at me with something close to understanding. Mrs. Patterson, he said, folding his hands on the desk. I'm glad you came in. I assume you received the letter about your husband's trust. I did, I replied, my purse clutched in my lap. And I'd like to discuss my will. He nodded slowly, pulling out a file. Of course. You have an existing will that leaves everything to your son, David? Correct. Yes, but I want to change it. Mr. Thompson raised his eyebrows slightly but said nothing, simply pulling out a fresh notepad. All right, what changes would you like to make? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was it. The moment where I chose myself, maybe for the first time in my life. I want to leave everything. The trust from Harold, my savings, the house, all of it, to the Riverside Children's Hospital. Specifically to their fund for children without families. Children who spend their birthdays alone in hospital rooms with no one to visit them. Mr. Thompson's pen paused on the paper. He looked up at me, searching my face. Mrs. Patterson, this is a significant decision. Have you discussed this with your son? No, and I don't intend to. Not until it's too late for him to change my mind. May I ask why? I smiled, but it was a sad smile, worn thin by years of disappointment. Because, Mr. Thompson, I spent my entire life teaching my son about love, sacrifice, and family. But some lessons can't be taught with words. They have to be learned through loss. My son forgot my birthday. He forgot I existed unless he needed something. But those children at the hospital, they don't have anyone to forget them. They've already been forgotten by the world. If I can give them something, a better playroom, new medical equipment, birthday parties they'll actually remember, then at least my life will have mattered to someone. Mr. Thompson was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was softer. Your life has always mattered, Mrs. Patterson, but I understand, and I'll make sure your wishes are carried out exactly as you've requested. We spent the next hour going over the details, signing papers, making everything legal and binding. When I walked out of that office, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I was punishing David, though part of me knew he'd see it that way, but because I was finally choosing to give my love to people who would treasure it. That evening, I made myself a proper birthday dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds, all my favorites. I set the table with my good china, the set Harold and I had received as a wedding gift 50 years ago. I lit a candle in the center, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat down alone. But I didn't feel lonely. Not anymore. As I ate, I thought about those children at the hospital. I thought about the little girl I'd seen once when visiting a friend, sitting in a wheelchair by the window, drawing pictures with crayons someone had donated. She'd looked up at me with big, hopeful eyes and asked, "Are you somebody's grandma?" "I am," I told her. "You're lucky," she'd whispered. "I don't have a grandma anymore." I hadn't been able to get her face out of my mind for weeks. Maybe I couldn't be David's mother in the way I'd hoped. Maybe I couldn't force him to see my worth or remember my existence. But I could be a grandmother to those children. In spirit, in legacy, in the gift I'd leave behind. 2 weeks later, Rebecca showed up at my door unannounced. She looked immaculate as always, perfectly styled hair, designer handbag, a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Alice," she said, stepping inside without being invited. "We need to talk." I set down my tea and looked at her calmly. "About what, dear?" "About the money. David told me you refused to help with the renovation. I think you're being incredibly selfish, frankly. We're family. Family helps each other." I studied her for a moment, this woman who had never once asked how I was, who looked at me like I was an obstacle to be managed rather than a person to be loved. "You're right, Rebecca," I said softly. "Family does help each other, but only when they actually treat each other like family." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up slowly, meeting her gaze with a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. And in that moment, I realized something. The gift life was about to give me wasn't revenge. It was freedom. But she didn't know that yet. None of them did. Rebecca stood in my living room, her arms crossed, waiting for an answer I wasn't sure she was ready to hear. But I'd spent too many years swallowing my words, tucking my feelings into corners where they wouldn't inconvenience anyone. "Not anymore." "What it means, Rebecca," I said, keeping my voice steady, "is that family isn't just a word you use when you need something. It's something you build, day by day, with presence and care and remembering that the people you love are still alive and breathing." Her jaw tightened. "Are you seriously still hung up on your birthday?" "David apologized for that." "Did he?" I tilted my head slightly, because I don't recall receiving an apology. I recall him asking for $6,000 in the same conversation where he couldn't remember the date I was born. "You're being dramatic. And you're being cruel." The words came out sharper than I intended, but they were true. "Do you know how many birthdays I've celebrated alone since Harold died? 5. 5 years of waking up hoping someone would remember, and 5 years of going to bed disappointed. And still, I showed up for every single one of your special days. Every anniversary dinner, every holiday, every time you needed a babysitter so you could go out and live your life." Rebecca's face flushed. "We have busy lives, Alice. We can't drop everything just because. Just because what? Because I'm old? Because I'm not important anymore?" I shook my head slowly. "You have time for what you make time for, Rebecca. And for 5 years, you and my son have made it very clear that I'm not worth your time unless I'm useful." She stared at me, speechless for once, her perfectly painted lips pressed into a thin line. "I think you should leave now," I said quietly. "And you can tell David that I meant what I said. I won't be funding your renovation, or anything else." Rebecca grabbed her purse with trembling hands. Whether from anger or shame, I couldn't tell. "You're going to regret this," she hissed as she headed toward the door. When you're old and alone and you need us, don't come crying. I smiled then, a real smile because she didn't understand. I was already old. I was already alone. They'd made sure of that years ago. Goodbye, Rebecca. The door slammed behind her, and the house fell silent once more. But this time, the silence felt different. Felt like peace. Over the next few months, something strange and wonderful happened. I started living for myself. I joined a watercolor painting class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for when I was busy raising David and caring for Harold. My hands were shaky at first, the brush awkward in my grip, but slowly, I found my rhythm. I painted sunsets and gardens and the view from my kitchen window. The small, beautiful things I'd stopped noticing somewhere along the way. I made friends, real friends. Clara, a widow like me, who had a wicked sense of humor and made me laugh until my sides hurt. Margaret, who'd never married but had lived a life full of adventure and told stories that made my quiet existence feel both small and suddenly full of possibility. We met for coffee every Thursday, and they never once forgot to ask how I was. I volunteered at Riverside Children's Hospital twice a week. I read stories to the kids, helped them with art projects, sat with the ones who had no visitors. And every time I walked through those doors, I felt Harold's presence, like he was walking beside me, nodding in approval. One little boy, Thomas, became especially dear to me. He was 7 years old, battling leukemia, with big brown eyes that reminded me of David when he was young. His parents had abandoned him, left him at the hospital and never came back. The nurses said it happened more often than people wanted to believe. "Miss Alice," he said one afternoon, holding up a drawing he'd made. "I drew you as a superhero. See? You have a cape and everything." I took the picture with trembling hands, studying the crayon figure with gray hair and a bright red cape. "Why did you make me a superhero, sweetheart?" "Because you save people," he said simply. "You saved me from being lonely." I held that little boy close, fighting back tears, and I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. David didn't call for 3 months. Not once. I waited, hoping he'd reach out, hoping he'd have some moment of clarity where he realized what he'd lost. But the phone stayed silent, until one Tuesday afternoon in late autumn, when he finally showed up at my door. He looked tired, older. There were lines around his eyes I didn't remember seeing before, and his shoulders sagged with a weight that seemed to press down on him. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, letting him enter. He walked to the kitchen table, the same table where I'd sat alone on my birthday, and sank into a chair. "Rebecca left me," he said without preamble. "Took the kids and moved in with her mother. Says I'm not present enough. That I don't appreciate what I have." My heart ached for him, the way it always had, the way a mother's heart always will. But I didn't rush to comfort him. I poured 2 cups of tea instead and sat down across from him. "I'm sorry, David." He laughed bitterly. "Are you? Because I feel like I deserve this. I feel like everything's falling apart because I've been a terrible person and the universe is punishing me." "The universe doesn't punish, sweetheart. It reflects. It shows us who we've become." He looked up at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Recognition. Like he was finally seeing me as a person, not just a fixture in his life. "I forgot your birthday," he whispered. "I forgot my own mother's birthday, and when you called me out on it, I made excuses. I didn't even apologize properly. I just kept taking and taking from you and never giving anything back." "Yes," I said gently. "You did. How do you not hate me?" I reached across the table and took his hand. "Because you're my son. Because I remember the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. Because I know you're capable of being better than this. But David, I can't make you better. You have to choose that for yourself." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I want to try. I want to fix this. With Rebecca, with the kids, with you. I just, I don't know where to start. Start by showing up, I said. Not when you need something. Not when it's convenient. Just show up. Be present. Remember that the people in your life won't be here forever. If you felt this story in your heart, my dear, then please subscribe to Grandma Alice Stories. Every week, I share tales of life, love, betrayal, and the wisdom that comes from surviving it all. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and join our family. Because these stories, they're not just mine, they're ours. And there's so much more to share. Over the next few weeks, David did try. He called every few days. He stopped by without asking for anything, just to sit and talk. He brought the kids, Emma and Jacob, and I watched them play in my garden while he helped me weed the flower beds. It wasn't perfect. Rebecca still hadn't come back, and he was struggling to balance work and single parenting. But he was trying, and that mattered. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, he turned to me with a curious expression. "Mom, I got a weird call today from some lawyer named Thompson. He said he needed to update some information about your estate planning. Do you know anything about that?" My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face neutral. "Yes, I've been working with Mr. Thompson on some things." "What kind of things?" I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, this person who'd hurt me and was now trying to heal, and I made a decision. "David, there's something I need to tell you. Your father left me some money. Quite a bit, actually. Money I didn't know about until after my birthday." His eyes widened. "How much?" "Enough to live comfortably. Enough to leave behind." I paused. "And I've decided what to do with it." "Okay." He looked confused, waiting. "I've changed my will. Everything is going to Riverside Children's Hospital. To the kids there who have no one." The color drained from his face. "What? Mom, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. But I'm your son. The house, the money, it should go to family. To me. To your grandchildren." I looked at him steadily. "It is going to children who need it. Children who've been forgotten, just like I was." He stared at me in stunned silence, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. The calculations, the realizations, the slow dawning horror of what his neglect had cost him. But what I couldn't know yet, what none of us could see coming, was that my decision would set off a chain of events that would test everything we thought we knew about love, family, and forgiveness. Because life wasn't done teaching us lessons. Not by a long shot. Thank you for listening, my dear. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you need to call, or if it simply made you think about the tables in your own life, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to Grandma Alice Stories. Every week, I share tales of love, loss, lessons, and second chances. Stories about real people, real struggles, and the wisdom that comes from living a long, full life. Hit that subscribe button, pour yourself another cup of tea, and join our family. Because here, everyone has a seat at the table. Until next time, remember, love is a verb, not a promise. And the family you choose can be just as strong as the family you're born into. With all my love, Grandma Alice.